I'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Finance Committee, April 18th, 2022. And we will start with approval of minutes for March 14th.
Motion.
I'll second that. Okay, any discussion? No. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Aye. Sorry, I didn't say it. And then we'll approve March 21st minutes.
Motion.
Second. Any discussion?
Nope.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes. All right, we're going to move on to preliminary 2020-2021 audit results. And I'll turn it over to Dan. Thank you, Dan.
Sure. So we got some information from the auditors. They were still working through, so these are preliminary in nature. They do line up pretty closely to our year-end financials that we've turned over to them for the audit. So figured we'd walk through budget to actual as it stands currently. Again, preliminarily, this is what it looks like. So you'll see, as we walk through the spreadsheet here, 2020-2021 budget had budgeted revenues of $64.4 million, budgeted expenditures of $66.6 million, and
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, that's a little easier.
It's a light show. Where's Jimmy Jack?
So essentially, the 2020-2021 budget had a deficit of $2.2 million. Currently, with the preliminary results, revenues are roughly $65.5 million, expenditures are $62.6 million, essentially showing a surplus or excess of $2.8 million.
Should that variance on the right, then 1.06 million, should that be not in brackets?
Yes and no, to a degree,
Okay.
depending on how you want to look at it. So yeah, this is revenue in excess of the budget, and then expenditures smaller than or less than
Okay.
the budgeted amount. When speaking with the auditors, what they basically came back with was they gave this number down here. So in C16, this 2.287 is what shows up on the financials as far as the net change in fund balance. You'll remember we had a $5 million transfer that related to the 1920 school year. When the shutdown occurred in March of 2020, a lot of the expenditures halted. There was a pretty decent amount of excess funds from the 1920 audit, or 1920 school year, and then we had a budgeted transfer. We had a transfer made in October or November of 2020 that shows up in the financials as an expense, shows up as an expenditure, and so trying to make sure that this is as transparent as possible when discussing surplus and deficit, because when looking at the financial statements, the bottom number, this 2.2 million deficit, is what is reported as basically the deficit in the general fund. What it's not showing, but it's elsewhere on the financials, on the report above it, is the transfer. So this $5.1 million transfer, I've been using the analogy of we took it out of one pocket, we put it in the other, it's still ours. But ultimately, when we're looking at this, it is a loss of $2.2 million of the general fund, but we did have money move into the capital reserve fund. So I can show, this is just as an example, this is the page from the 2020 budget, or financials rather. And I just want to, not to confuse this situation, but this line here, this excess deficiency of revenues over expenditures, this is where that excess came from in the 1920 school year. So that 5.1 million that we transferred related to the excess that was experienced in the 1920 school year. So so I just want to show that as a reference. This is pretty much, this is really the line item to focus on, because it's the expenses or revenues or the expenses prior to any transfers. But that being said, the ultimate result on the fund balance for the 2021 audit is going to be a decrease of 2.2, almost 2.3. So the preliminary ending fund balance for June of 21, being the beginning of the 21-22 school year, this year, is projected to be $17.6 million. So let me know where I
And
lost
that's everything,
anybody.
right? That includes our sorry, long day. That includes everything.
This is general fund.
General
This
fund.
is general fund.
Okay.
So some of that 17 million, though, is already committed, correct? Or is that our uncommitted fund balance?
Part is committed. We have commitments for PSERS and bond payments as well. So those are funds that the board is committed. They still are in the general fund balance. So they're committed for those purposes to basically balance the budget for those particular purposes. That's not to say that they can't be uncommitted if that was the will of the board, to be used for any other expenses that would be, in the operating budget. They could also be transferred into the capital reserve to pay for any results that come from the feasibility study, any additional stages that we want to pursue for the capital or for the GIZA project. So those are all funds that are sitting in the general fund, but they could be, if the board wanted to, moved into capital reserve for capital projects.
Any questions? Sorry, I could say that. Anybody in the audience, questions?
So we'd be in a really deep hole if COVID didn't save us some money.
COVID definitely had an impact on the funds that we have available. I can't say that it's 100% attributable to any savings from COVID, but I know that there's absolutely funds out of this $5 million that in the 1920 school year primarily was transportation and fuel costs that went into that basically didn't have to go out the door and pay for transportation because we weren't transporting. Similarly, last year was kind of the same situation where the transportation in the beginning part of the year was limited in the sense that we were transporting our special ed population. And then even when everybody returned 2 days a week in January with that Wednesday, that at-home Wednesday. So there's a day a week that's not being included as far as any kind of transportation costs. So that, along with any of the other factors as far as students exiting, it didn't have a huge impact on the transportation side of things. But as we kind of gone through it, transportation's been a big impact or had a big impact from COVID. And so we've seen some financial savings in that sense.
Okay.
Yeah, wouldn't some of that also been attributed to the ESSER funds that we used for other expenditures also? So it's kind of a hard thing unless you analyze every account.
Right. And even with the ESSER fund, so they pretty much net zero. So
Yeah.
the revenues that we've gained from any of the ESSER funds have corresponding expenditures. So when we're talking revenues and expenditures, if they've increased equally based on the revenue coming in from the ESSER funds, the expenses are also going, are matching that. So it's not going to cause that massive variance, other than possibly some timing differences between the expenses being incurred in one year and then the revenues not being received or recognized until the following year.
Gotcha. Okay. All right.
So the timetable on the full report is,
So they expect to, they're in the review process, they expect to have the full report come the week of the 25th. We should have the full report that we can distribute to the board. We then, once we get that full report, we have to do some of the MD&A piece, that's basically the beginning part of the audit that goes along with it, but the financial reports themselves that the auditors prepare will be, they anticipate having completed by during the week of the 25th.
Okay, good.
ideally, you'll come to the workshop and there'll be a nice copy sitting there.
Good.
It's
I'm ready.
Ideally.
Great.
I've got fingers crossed.
Good. Okay. All right. Anyone have anything else on the audit? No?
Not yet.
Okay. Digest
A
it.
lot to process with that.
Yeah.
Flip.
Okay. So now we'll move on to our projected 2021-2022
And
finance.
if any other questions come up, even through this or, talking about any other topics.
We know where to find you.
Feel free to interrupt or you know where to find me.
Yes, we do. Good.
All right,
Thanks.
so next topic was the projections for the 21-22 school year, this current year. So I know we discussed this previously, I think in January. And you'll notice that the projections from January, although we're not here, were drastically different than what I have as far as a projection currently. So similar process here as far as going through the budget to actuals. We were budgeting $66.5 million in revenues, expenditures of $71.2 million, and a projected deficit of $4.7 million. As of this morning, going through the financials and projecting where we are currently with essentially what our future expenses look like through the end of the year, and the revenues on, for that matter, we're looking at 66.3, 66.4 million in revenues, 65.8 million in expenditures, and essentially then a surplus of just over $500,000. So there's a decent swing here, obviously, as far as, and it's just a little. It's a little bit of an undersell. As you can see, though, the primary part of that is the expenditure side. Looking into exactly where that, where those differences are with the expenditures. The revenues seem to be pretty accurate as far as what we were budgeting. But as of now, we're trending significantly lower than expected and budgeted on the expenditure side. I can say it's not because of charter schools. Charter schools, there's some significant expenses there, and I think we're only, we're going to be right there with budget. We had predicted and we had budgeted additional funds in the hopes that kids were going to come back, and that hasn't panned out. We currently have 190 students out at the charter schools, and that's pretty much where we started, or ended last year. We started this year at 154, and we've seen it up, tick up, throughout the school year so far. So right now, as we're going through this, we're going to have to assess where those additional variances are. This is just a big number to see, 5.4 million. Realistically, we're going to be diving into that later this week as we pull this together. I'd say honestly, I wasn't expecting it to look like this because we talked about it in January. The number I've had in my head is that 5.2 million deficit that we had talked about at that January meeting, and pulling this together, eye-opening. We're digging into exactly where those variances are.
Okay.
We did transfer just over $13,500. So you're saying $13,500. So we did have that transfer earlier in the year. That was related to the athletic budget from the 2021 school year. That we transferred that for the turf field replacement fund. So just to wrap this slide up, using the fund balance from the previous slide, the 2021 preliminary audit of 17.6 million, if we were to have the just under $500,000 change in fund balance, if this projection is accurate, which I hope it is, I think it is, we would end up having a preliminary 21-22 ending fund balance of just over 18 million. Again, to Judy's point, that 18 million, part of it is committed. Also having those funds available for any of the additional feasibility studies or any outcomes for feasibility, any of the roofing projects that we've been talking about. I think that it's going to be important to figure out exactly what our anticipated expenditures are on the capital side and make sure that we're funding those appropriately. And I think this would probably be a good starting point to say, okay, here are the funds that we have. How do we want to make sure that they're available for those anticipated expenses?
Okay. Anybody? Questions, anybody?
So at our next finance committee meeting, will you be able to provide us a breakdown of the $5.5 million?
Yep.
I definitely want to see that.
Not a problem.
Okay. Keith, anything?
No?
Not right now? Okay. Anybody? Audience? Okay.
And Judy, if we have something sooner than the next finance committee, because I think the next finance committee is
After the preliminary budget.
16th.
Yeah.
I thought we were having one before, no? I guess not.
Not part time.
Yeah.
We think you need one, but it's different.
No, I just had that in my head.
Yeah, I think it's after we vote on the preliminary budget.
Yeah.
This is the last one.
This is the
so
last
after
one
we vote.
before
Yeah.
the May 12th.
Unless you decide we want to have another.
The next one is what, I think it's the 16th?
The 16th,
yeah.
yep.
I would really like to see the reason for a $5.5 million
Sure.
swing.
No, it's,
Which is actually more like almost a $10 million swing, because just a few months ago, you were talking about, you thought we were going to have several $1 million deficit this year, correct?
well, that was it would be essentially this figure here. So, yeah, a couple months ago, we were projecting a $3.2 million deficit. It's now, $500,000 surplus, which I understand is a hard pill to swallow. As I was going through this, I pulled this up, I double checked it, triple checked it, and then I came over to Al and said, we got to chat real
Came in
quick.
very sheepishly.
Did I was like,
Well, I mean, it's good news.
Yeah.
It's very good news.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a significant difference
it
that
is,
I'd like
and I was
to know.
cautious about as I pulled this up and going through it again and again and again, going, all right, what did I miss then, or what am I missing now?
Well, it's happened
Because-
over the years, so I mean, it's not uncommon. So it's not like, a 1 in a million chance of this happening. Next time you come into Alan, just come in, Alan, I got some great news. Okay, really
Next
sell
time?
it to
Yeah,
him.
all right.
And take credit for it.
Well, that actually
But,
helps
um,
make up for the.
But I mean, we've seen this happen
step.
over the years, so it's
Yeah.
not uncommon.
No.
Yeah,
Just don't
especially
want
with the past 2 years that we've had.
So I'm cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, a lot of the details are more important part, right? Where's the
So that we
variance?
don't make the
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
assumptions. Yeah.
Agreed.
A false assumption, yeah. No false assumptions,
Yeah.
that's not good. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. As I say, as of this morning, time wasn't allowing to get into that detail, still pulling other things together for the rest of the agenda, so
Mhm.
next thing is going to be diving into that and figuring out
You just can't get something out.
what's different about that.
Right. Okay. All right. What do you say? You want to do that tonight?
Do you want to?
I would like to.
I just said to them, I'm
Do what?
going to let the chair decide.
I would like to have one tonight.
Good, let's do it
That'd be
tonight
okay.
then. I like that idea.
Yeah.
Next meeting?
Mhm. I just would feel better if we had one more before.
Move the meeting or a second meeting? Because right now the scheduled meetings, 12th is the board meeting, then the 16th
It's the finance.
is the finance, then June 13th is right before June 16th, which is the final budget meeting. So if do you want to move the 16th to the 19th, or do you want to add the 19th and keep the 16th? I'm sorry, the 9th,
Yeah, I know what you
and
meant.
then keep the 16th as well.
Thoughts?
I can see moving it to the 9th and skipping the 16th.
Yeah, I agree, and, you know, if after the 12th, you know, we feel that there's a reason to meet before
The June one.
we could always do that, but,
Yeah, there is a June 13th finance meeting, we changed that for the 20th, moved it up, so it's prior to the voting meeting on the 16th,
so
a
we've
couple
got
days before.
one.
Right. I'm okay with changing the 16th back to the 9th, if that's all right with you
Okay.
guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that Arts Week? That's not, no, it's,
It is Arts Week, but there's nothing on Monday.
okay,
Okay, good. Well, that's good then.
Yeah.
yeah.
Then it was meant to be.
So now it's finance and Arts Week.
Yes. Finance and art too. Everyone has to bring a craft.
Or
Okay.
get up and sing.
Yeah, no, okay, I'll bring a craft too, like I said. Okay,
Okay.
so if we're good, then we'll move on to the 22-23 budget and start with athletics. Just so happens we have a handout
So
for
you
that
guys-
too.
everybody has a handout, which may be nicer to look at than the spreadsheet, but
But there they are.
navigate both. The big, real big takeaway from the athletic budget is the addition of volleyball. It's roughly $34,000 in staffing, uniforms, supplies, dues. So that was a big takeaway. The other is a little bit of the transportation unknown. So currently, we're contracting with Norris Transportation to cover a good amount of the athletic trips.
Okay.
And so in conversations with Bobby, he's anticipating probably needing another $15,000. The issue with, potential issue here with using Norms is that we don't, unlike Christ, where we have a 7-year contract that's already written in stone, Norms isn't. And so we've had a couple of price variances and increases based on fuel costs. So they've put in basically a fuel surcharge. They didn't quite call it that, they just said that due to operating expenses.
This is what it is.
The rate is going to be a little bit higher. It's not substantial on the trip itself, or on the, per hour, it's a relatively small dollar amount, but we use them for quite a bit of the transportation for athletics, and all those trips are hours.
So since we're contracting with Norms for those trips, since we have a contract with Price, we've got that fuel, and we supply the fuel, we cannot do the same with Norm, or
Yeah, but
use
how
what
would it
they've already
work?
bought?
How would it work? They use, Norms does other stuff too.
Yeah, and they have their own,
That would be hard.
they have their own
Okay.
fuel essentially. Honestly, I don't know that we've had that conversation as far as, okay, pre-trip, would you come over to the Price Depot, fill up and keep track? 'Cause
Or
they're able to
even,
keep track.
fill it before they come over and top off at ours
Right.
when they finish.
We could follow up with them and see if that's
Do they give you a mileage breakdown? You know, you're taking the kids out to
Right.
Lancaster for whatever, and round trip, it's 175 miles.
So they've
or
built it
it's just-
into their hourly rate essentially.
Okay.
So,
Just trying to understand how
Yeah,
that's happening.
so they've built in their additional operating costs into their hourly rate, opposed to, here's our hourly rate, and then here's the additional mileage surcharge per
Okay.
mile.
Okay.
Is Christ anticipating having a driver difficulty again next year that we will need to continue with Norman?
At this point, yeah, I think the crisis is still going to have.
Isn't it more the scheduling too, as to what the timing?
The scheduling does factor in as far as needing to have the vehicles and the drivers available for a 2 o'clock run, or to get students to the athletic activities and then back in order to do any other runs, or a matter of the timing that if they're, say if they're going to go at 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock to get wherever they need to go and get back for a 3:30 dismissal at an elementary, it doesn't line up.
Yep.
And it's not like it's missing by 5 minutes, it's half hour, it's an hour. There's just not enough time as far as getting to and from the events. I know we've had a couple of instances where we've taken students and dropped them at 1 o'clock at an away game, and they're sitting at that particular school doing, if they're doing online or if they're doing anything, as far as their schoolwork, just to try and make ends meet, essentially, make the transportation and the instructional time, meet up. It's just not an easy situation to navigate. So I think we do anticipate using norms, because Price does have a number of individuals resigning and retiring at the end of the school year.
Yeah.
So even with our summer programming, that's going to be a bit of a trick as far as staffing those vehicles for the summer programming, just with, I think Jen said 7 or 8, either drivers and or aides, it's a combination, retiring or resigning from Price at the end of the year.
Okay.
So they're working on it. They do anticipate, I think they're going to be attending the job fair.
Oh,
And
that's
if-
good.
And if not, I know that we're going to have flyers on our table to try and promote for them, so we can get as many drivers as we can. They're always looking.
I'll have to ask Jen to put one of those signs out in front of my work. It's a good spot.
She'd be more than happy to.
I know, I keep forgetting to ask her when I see her. Okay.
Do you have any other athletic information? Because I have some questions.
Those were the big pieces, as far as, I know in the other meetings, we've gone line by line, the athletic line item budget is 6 pages worth of information, so it is a lot to kind of go through. I don't want to monopolize the meeting with going line by line unless the committee would like to.
Go ahead, Peggy, if you have a couple questions.
Well, I would think another significant impact is going to be the increase of that administrative assistant position to full-time.
Yeah, I
It is.
saw that.
The piece to that, so we've done staffing at a previous meeting. So although in the athletic office, we've done, we did staffing and presented that a few meetings ago, I think in the February 22nd meeting. It definitely has an increase. Off the top of my head,
I can't remember how much it was.
I did have it.
Typically, the budget's starting at 300, so the stats will be in a different line.
It is,
than salary.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing, as far as it was presented, I know we had this, I just don't have that off the top of my head as far as the increase.
Has that person started?
Yes.
I'm really interested to see how the duties are assigned and redistributed. And another question, is he even talking to you about girls wrestling?
I have not had a conversation.
Somebody needs to talk to him about that, because it's coming. And just because we rolled out a sports and participation survey for this investigation, and we're adding volleyball, doesn't mean we need to add volleyball. We do a survey one time is not a clear indicator that we should be adding volleyball. But I get what you're doing, but you need to talk to him about wrestling, because it's started.
Yeah, but he's aware, he's forwarded me a couple of emails from the person from the outside.
Well, then we need to plan for that, because the common sense place to start that is at middle school, because they're coming up through the elementary right now. And so by the time they get to middle school in another year or two, we need to be planning for that, and then we need to plan for the high school. And I will be pushing for that even when I'm no longer on the board.
Not to derail budget, but as far as, I don't know anything about girls wrestling. Is it can't the girls wrestle with men's wrestling or
I
boys
hope
wrestling?
not.
Okay.
I mean, right now, there's different models across the state with what schools are doing, but I certainly wouldn't recommend girls wrestling boys. And I think we need to start a girls' team, because the PIAA won't sanction it until there's 30 schools with girls wrestling. And right now, we're at about 35.
Okay, so it's currently, it's not sanctioned by?
No, and
Okay.
don't get me started on that, that's another
Wow.
session, complaint session for another time.
I'm not, I'd rather talk about budget.
Much more fun.
So, you know, I just wish we could have more vision in the athletic department. And most of you know how I feel about that.
Is that all you had for questions? Because I'll.
Do you want more?
If you have more,
You
yeah.
have more, have them, you know.
No, I'll stop. Before I say more. than-
I'm here with you for the next few hours, so I don't care.
You can't go anywhere.
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Well, I do have one other thing. What I mentioned in our meeting earlier this afternoon about that ticket manager position, and really looking at that to see whether or not we really need it. I'm just asking you to investigate.
Okay. No, we can definitely look into it. I know previous conversations, I think the idea was with the addition of Michelle, right?
Michelle.
Okay. With Michelle, that the duties that she was going to have are going to be different than the ticket manager. But we can definitely look at that to make sure that that's in line.
I mean, I never worked in a school district where the athletic department had a ticket manager. And I worked in some big-ass school districts. I mean, I didn't have one at State College. I don't get it. It just blows my mind.
Peg, as far as the girls wrestling, do you know, throughout your network of acquaintances, professionals and friends and whatnot, do you know anybody who's in positions where they've started a girls wrestling team?
Oh, yeah, Boyertown's getting ready to start. Turk Valley's getting ready to roll. So they're popping up.
Do you have any idea what it might have cost them to start
It's
implementing?
minimal, because right now, Boyertown's going to use the model where the girls practice with the boys, not girl on boy practice, but they're in the room with the boys,
Mhm.
and they're using the boys' coach. He's going to coach both genders until they get to, I think the number they're proposing is 12 or 15 girls. Once they get to that marker, then they'll hire a girls' coach.
Okay.
That's the way Boyertown is thinking of doing it.
Are we-
You know, other places.
Are we
just-
discussing this at all in our athletics committee or anything?
Do we have an athletics team?
Extracurriculars yet? If not, I'll show up and
I
I'll bring
think
it
it
up for
would
you.
probably fall under the extracurricular.
That's what I was gonna say. I don't think we have them specifically.
Gosh, I would love us to have an athletic.
Yeah. Can it fall under extracurricular?
Is that-
I mean, it technically falls under extracurricular, sure.
Yeah.
You know, right now, the conversation is someone's at the youth level having girls in the program saying, there's
Right.
girls coming. So I think they've been communicating with Peg, they've been communicating
Yeah.
with Bobby, they've been communicating with whoever will listen, saying we want to make sure we set something up. So
Are girls currently allowed to wrestle on the boys' team? Is that allowed?
Some schools are doing that,
Okay.
and it's not a good thing.
I didn't say, well, I was just
You know,
asking
yeah,
what the,
But some schools, yes, some schools, because it's the only way that those girls in that school are even able to compete, because their school is not moving in the direction of a single girls' team. So there, like I said, there's different variations throughout the state. where
Let's
it's-
pick this up another night.
Sorry.
Well, we can pick this up another night. I'm more than happy to do that with you.
I just wish we could be more proactive in some of these things and not wait till it happens and then do a knee-jerk
Like catch up.
reaction. We know these girls are coming up, you know? Mark's been talking to us, you know, it's like,
isn't the same conversation about boys lacrosse, which is a total other conversation that,
boys lacrosse?
good.
Oh, I got hit by, what's his name, 2 years ago on that one.
Yeah, I know, as have I. I
It's
mean,
huge.
right, it's the same conversation. It's an interest that is coming through. We've been kind of saying, we need to find out what's going on Title IX wise to know if that's optional, because we've added the indoor girls winter track
Yeah.
and now volleyball as a part of that investigation, which we still haven't, we're still waiting to hear back there, so.
I think if we're serious about adding the volleyball and the track And talking about adding the girls wrestling will open the door for bringing boys lacrosse in,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
It
Yeah, I
will-
don't think there's anyone anti any of these things.
No.
There's no one
We
saying
just
no,
have to
boys
figure it out.
lacrosse, no this. That's not it at all.
It's just
But I
what.
can tell you that there's definitely some inside the department, if we use the athletic department as athletic director and coaches as a department, there's definitely concern with bringing on more sports and thinning out other sports. Well, with the demand, I'm just saying, comment. Your body language tells it all, Peg. I'm just telling you the conversation, bringing everyone up to speed. It's not like we're not having some conversations on, at least I'm included in some of the conversations. That didn't matter. Volleyball was moving forward based upon whether it was a survey or was what right for opportunities. Because the young students that came out for the intramural, for lack of a better term, volleyball open sessions were not the students that are participating in those sports. They were a new set of students, for the most part. Of course, you get a couple, but it was a new sport. So it was like, okay, don't poo-poo it until it happens, and then, we'll address that, and it's what students want. If that has to change, that has to change, so,
Yeah, I mean, the object is to pull kids out of the hallways that aren't doing anything.
yeah.
And just to clarify, we did run the survey a second time based on this OCR investigation. So we reran it this past fall because the students had rolled over. It had been 3 years, so we wanted to capture the students who are currently in high school, and the need still existed. So we ran the extracurricular opportunities this year, and just as Alan said, we got new student interest.
And we wedged them in between the gaps of no sports, downtime, the 2 or
Yeah.
3 weeks. We wedged those opportunities so everyone would have an opportunity.
And I didn't know that. I didn't know you ran it again.
We
you
did.
know? So that's why I'm giving you the body language.
Yeah, so it's definitely seems to still be an interest for the students, which is good, yeah. And to echo Alan's sentiments, we were told by our own attorney, I would strongly recommend that the district not add boys lacrosse until we
sort it all out.
get
Let the dust settle. Yeah.
volleyball under control, and then, if girls wrestling is something we want to look at next, but
We'll get there.
we will.
We gotta
We're gonna have to.
we gotta have that vision though. We gotta keep talking and not be afraid to add.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So as I'm just looking through these, just to comparing them, I see it looks like there's a lot more, and that's a relative word. It's not a huge number, but there's more swimming. Like water polo, I see water polo has more, and swimming, high school swimming, water polo. Like, they're not a lot, like water polo is like double.
Well, teaching those horses to swim.
I know. I know.
Which,
Oh, I'm sorry. So 3250, 610. It's near the bottom of page 4. That helps. So there's water polo went from 805 to 1650, and I did have spring track changing, but I see where it went to another one.
Can that be a reflection of an increase in participants?
it could be, honestly.
Or is it in our pool maintenance too? I don't know.
No,
We fixed the valve.
Yeah, I
That's
mean,
supplies.
So 610 is general supplies.
yeah, it's general supplies. I'm not, honestly, from a water polo standpoint, I'm not sure what all goes into the general supplies for that sport.
Well, I would think from time to time, when a coach orders a big ticket item for like a piece of training equipment or something, you're gonna see a spike in that budget.
Well, that was
that
kind of
year.
where I was going with that. I didn't know if we were having improvements somewhere that I didn't know about. That's all.
Yeah.
Because it looked like when I ticked them off, they were swimming.
Honestly, I'd have to go back.
Yeah, that's spot specifically.
Okay.
It could be a clock issue, I mean,
No,
Oh,
we
yeah,
just,
you know what,
no,
maybe
we already did that.
goal, timing of the touch
New
pads.
pads? Yeah.
Okay, I'm just asking, and I know we're supposed to be on a uniform round robin, but we haven't heard about that for a few years. I'm just
Rotation
hoping we're
I
still
know- I
on.
know as far as, and if I look back to see, budget areas, I know I've seen separate line items for uniforms, and I know Bobby has so he has that on.
Bobby's
He's
coming
supposed to have
he's
it
coming
on
to the
schedule.
May extracurricular committee meeting. Bobby has a,
Oh, okay.
so we can ask him to present.
He's following that pretty
Share the-
close, because I get involved with that with equipment, so he's been pretty good with that.
Okay, Yeah, we didn't follow up on it recently. So that's good. I know it was a big topic for a little while
Yeah,
there.
that's been rolling pretty well.
Okay, good. Okay. That's all I have about it. Otherwise, they're pretty much the same. Except for the addition of the volleyball. You can see where that comes in. And the transportation extra. Okay, I'm good with that. Anybody else have any questions about athletics? No? All right. We'll move on to human resources.
It's enthralling.
It's what?
Enthralling.
Yes, I know, I'm sure it is. Yeah, really.
So exciting. Hold on to your hat, folks.
I put my seatbelt on.
Well, the first one went down, so that's good. You're really.
So, all right, so looking at this, Mrs. Fisher's budget doesn't have 6 pages worth of detail on this too.
You're slipping.
Yep.
That's a good thing, don't add more. The biggest, there's a decrease here of roughly $20,000 in the staffing, HR accounts. The big pieces that go into this are some of the staff development that pertain to non-certified staff and certified non-instructional staff. So non-certified staff like me, certified non-instructional, which is Alan. Those accounts show up here as far as professional development. Any dues and fees that pertain to them are in the respective budgets. Alan's would be in superintendent's, my business office. But the professional development, PDE basically says it all needs to go into these specific accounts.
Okay.
So those ones are spelled out here. That's the 2834 function area and the 2836 functions. Also with that is any travel that goes into the professional development time. So if there's a conference that any of us are going to that requires travel, lodging, anything like that, that's also budgeted in here.
Okay.
As far as specifics, I know not on this report, it's elsewhere, but our sub-costs are basically, as they kind of, they factor in as well. I'm off script here since it's not on this report, because that's something that we're monitoring elsewhere. But I know I've been working with Georgie as far as what what our needs are as far as subs, what we're currently experiencing as far as shortages, and I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add to that.
I would just add that I'll likely be coming to the board to ask that you consider addressing our daily sub and our building sub rates. We addressed our long-term sub rates, if you remember, at the beginning of last school year, and that has paid dividends because we've been able to successfully secure long-term subs because we're very competitive in that area. We still are challenged with daily subs and building subs, in particular building subs.
Yes, according to Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't care about Facebook, but I do care about staffing. So that's definitely a problem, and it's an area that we're going to have to likely take a look at this year. Additionally, some support staff salaries. That's the story for another day, but we're likely going to have to address, once again, custodial, paraprofessionals, and food service. I know that we addressed them last year in the comp plans, and we brought them up a little bit, but we just aren't able to compete with the direct market. I mean, we're competing with literally every single frontline employer. So anyone that's hiring a frontline staff person, that's who our competition is at this point. And Walmart's starting at $22 an hour on third shift. So, we're struggling to get paraprofessionals in the classrooms with the children badly. And even our contracted services can't find them. So we are down custodials and we're down paras, and we can't find them. So it's just something we're gonna have to think about, but those are the areas that I'll likely be coming to you in pretty short order to ask you to consider increasing. I'll give you supporting information so you can kind of see what we're looking at, but just so you know.
And I know we talked about the custodial side of things in the facilities
Yep.
committee as far as what that looks like if there's, I guess, what was Doug referring to as, brownouts or whatever he was, as far as, okay, we're going to do the major areas, take the trash out, but it's possible that then certain classrooms, the classrooms weren't going to get swept every single day. It was a matter of trying to prioritize essentially the sanitation and trash opposed to,
Yeah.
the daily, mopping or sweeping or anything like that. So it's a difficult situation. I know we've been talking about that, so
Yep.
Yeah.
we'll see.
I did put plugs in when I did the student tours, so I had 30, not quite 30 kids. I put a shameless plug in for custodial time.
I wasn't following, so you put plugs in.
I did, I'm
I was
sorry.
saying the same
yeah.
thing, so.
I was confused as to
Sorry.
whether-
Almost makes me
I knew
think
what I
about
was
a retirement.
You work at
Almost.
Walmart, you mean?
No. Go back to my old stomping grounds and work custodial.
There you go.
All right.
So I have a question for you. Georgie, how are you looking at that as impacting next year's budget?
Well, Dan and I are going to be working on numbers, so I don't know exactly what the numbers will look like because that'll depend largely upon what you all are considering or would consider for an increase. Our custodial rates right now are $12.50 to start, and that was an increase from last year. So we've got to get up in the ballpark. I mean, I would love to see. Keith, don't look at me like that.
I know what you're going to say. Go ahead, say
I
it.
mean, honestly,
15.
What makes sense?
at least 15.
Yeah.
I was going to
I-
say 16.
Mhm.
I can tell you the Paris, the closest we are is to Pottsboro for Paris, and they're like $2 more an hour, and they're the lowest by far. So it's us way down here, then Pottsboro, and then everybody else is up here. So
What
we
are they when they're
cannot-
up here?
They're, I mean, 16, 18, 20 to start. It's tough, and we can't find people. They are just, and you guys always ask about exit data. My plan is to start giving exit data twice a year, so June ideally and December, because I feel like that'll tell a story. It's going to be the first, at the end of the year, the people who have left, and then the first half of the year, right? So everything that we've gotten this year, the bulk have been support staff have left, and it's almost always for wages.
The difficult part there, and we've gone through this, there's more to our wage opposed to
Yes.
Walmart's wage. When
Right.
we talk about $15 an hour,
Yeah.
well, 15 plus our piecers on top of our benefits on top of,
Yeah.
it adds up very quickly. And so to compete at a $22 an hour starting rate for Walmart just is extremely difficult to do if you're talking about dollars in your pocket,
Yeah.
sensitive employees.
Yeah.
It's a tough sell having a pension
It is.
available, maybe low on the priority list.
I can tell you almost all the time it's low on the priority list. They would love for that to be the biggest factor, but the reality is they're trying to keep the lights on. So
Yeah.
unless they're a double family income or family who maybe the other spouse is, able to kind of make up the difference in wages, it's a major concern for staff. So they don't have that luxury. And then of course, PSERS is a mandatory deduction. So that 7% for a lot of people is a significant,
Sure.
significant
What's
number.
the priority of benefits for people that you see coming through? What do they think about that?
Healthcare. It's wages
Well,
first and then healthcare.
that's what I meant, healthcare, excuse me.
Yeah, it's wages and then healthcare. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the only thing they honestly care about.
So, speaking outside the box here, if we did something to where we could give them a better shot at healthcare than wages, do you think that would make a difference?
Our support staff get the best healthcare. They get the 7% offer
Right, but what
with
if
our
they?
awesome plan. I mean, they love that, and that's great, because it gives them an affordable way to provide excellent care for their children. But it's really the wages. The wages are the problem.
Okay.
That's why they're leaving. So they would forgo, I would be willing to say, they would forgo their amazing benefits if their wages were higher, because at the end of the day, that's what they need in order to pay their bills.
Yep.
So,
Any devil's advocate? Well, we'll discuss this later.
yeah, I just
Sorry.
wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Okay, thank you.
But I can get you, Judy, to answer your question, I can get you a better idea of a number maybe if you could give me till the end of the week, I'll crunch the
Oh,
numbers.
yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Next week.
Even maybe an update would be
Yeah.
fine? That'd be great. Okay, that would be great. Okay. Anyone else have questions?
Oh, I'm sorry, did you say for the update?
Yeah, that'd be
Okay.
fine. That would be really helpful, because that,
Sure.
I don't think it's gonna be a giant impact, and if
No.
it makes a big impact in us getting those people,
Yeah,
then, you
that
know.
would be great, thank you.
Then we need those people.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, alrighty, move on to business office.
All right, so in reviewing the business office budget, you'll see, first line, we had $75,000 budgeted. That seems to be higher than what we've experienced normally, so we brought that down to basically match what the historics have been, which are close to the 41, 42. You'll see that the 2021 and 21, 22 amounts are blank. That's usually something that we're getting squared away with part of the audit as far as the accounting side of it. So as we don't have the final numbers in for 2021, that's still blank. I'd anticipate that being close to this $45,000 range, and then the same thing is going to be true for the 21-22 school year. We did have a savings moving to Berks County IU with our tax collection software. So it did have a savings. It's in a different account here. This $15,000 that we have budgeted for 22-23 school year, it is in the account for the IU opposed to where it was previously, which was with other providers. The guidance we had from our auditors was anything that you're paying to the IU, putting your 322. While I don't necessarily agree with it, they move it if I don't do what they want. So
Yep.
they put it there anyway.
Overruled.
Yeah. So
So that's why there's a long list of zeros, that you've moved all those to a different account, is what you're saying?
yeah, there's a number of them that have moved, and predominantly that's part of the software moving from a bigger software company to the IU. And as odd as that sounds, that's where my disagreement with the auditors, as far as if we're not paying the IU for an educational service.
Right, it's totally different.
Also, you'll see a reduction from the bonding, so all the tax collectors are bonded. We do pay for the bonding, so that's every 4 years. So this, of course, the 21-22 was the lucky year where all the bonding was due. So you'll see this decreasing from a budget of $17,000 to zero because their bonds are good for 4 years.
And is that printing cost up because of it going to Berkheimer, or is that printing cost as far as, just because it's more expensive? It's like double.
It was more expensive on the printing side, although it wasn't as, so the increase on the printing side with going to Berkheimer with the per cap didn't outweigh the savings that we had moving in that direction from essentially it's the printing and the service itself. So where we were paying the tax collectors to collect the per cap bills, we're basically paying Berkheimer that
Right.
one lump sum.
Right.
The other items here were pretty flat. We've moved some of the technology-related expenses into the IT budget.
So
just to
that's
keep-
like the COM one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of those have moved. The software package, we were splitting that out between a portion to the HR budget, a portion to the business office budget. We're putting it into the IT because it's a district-wide
Okay.
expense. We're going to get to two other things because I have 2 minutes.
That's okay, go ahead.
As far as debt, should we review this with you as well? So the 21-22 budget was $5.3 million. Here's the breakdown between interest and principal, roughly $2 million in interest, $3.2 million in principal. As we move forward into the 22-23 school year, we're looking at about 1.9 in interest, 3.6 in principal, so it does tick up a couple $100,000. This is anticipated then to just be flat and then sort of decrease over the life.
Next 500 million years.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing bitter about it.
No, I don't sense that at all.
No, sorry.
I don't want to go over, so what I will do is I'm going to send the spreadsheet as well as the committee has the handout for the revenue side of things. So it's broken down by major revenue source. You'll see it has a separate breakdown for the taxes versus state revenue, federal revenue, and everything in between. I'll say, if we want to flip to the back page just for the quick 30-second overview.
Okay.
So we're looking at the original budget for 21-22 school year was $66.5 million. We're projecting for 22-23, we've made adjustments. This is still at zero as far as tax increase. So the amounts that are in the current real estate taxes on the front page are basically at zero. We instead will decrease it down to a total of $230,000. We're still projecting that revenues increasing almost to $68 million. A portion of that, a good portion of that is additional ESSER funds that we plan on expending in next year's budget. So the corresponding revenue to those expenses is also budgeted in. So essentially, if you're going to spend $1 million, you're going to have revenue of $1 million also built into the budget because it's not going to be locally funded.
Right. It'll just be a wash.
It'll be a wash.
Any questions?
Sorry I rushed through that
That's
last
okay.
bit. We can definitely go into this in a little more detail, or if you have questions as you go through paperwork and documents, just give me a shout. Walk through it.
Go ahead.
Not related to this exactly, but
Okay.
where did we ever land with redoing those bonds?
The bond refunding, so the bond refunding, I knew it was going to come up, is also relying on having the audit complete and not having the final financial statements. As of right now, we've been unable to complete the refunding. I'm not going to say that we've completely lost the opportunity to do so, but I will say that we see as the interest rates rise and the Fed keeps increasing rates, that the savings become less and less as we get further and further out. This is part of not having the audit, the delaying the audit, and not having everything squared away up until now is just definitely it's definitely going to decrease the savings that we would see from refunding.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Audience?
We did have one more thing to add, if I can have 30 more seconds. I had
Sure.
a note in my notebook from this morning that I forgot to bring up during my segment. We did, along the lines of the para challenge, we're having a challenge securing paraprofessionals for our summer programs. So we filled a lot of the vacancies, but we still have some remaining. We have a few district staff who have expressed interest, but historically the district has paid one flat rate for a paraprofessional in the summer for the summer programs because it is a job it's basically the same job, but it was viewed previously as a different type of job. So they provided a flat rate of $13 an hour last year. So what we're proposing, or what we're asking, is if you would consider allowing existing staff to take those roles as paraprofessionals, because that's what they do during the school year, but earn their regular rate of pay. Because some of them are earning, if they've been with us for 10, 15 years, they might be at $18 an hour. They're not going to take $13 an hour and come in and help with the summer programs and lose $5 an hour. And frankly, it's more beneficial to the children to have well-trained staff who already know them than it is to find a college kid who's willing to come in and work great for the college kid, and we're grateful to have them, but it would be really great if we could bring our own staff in. So if that's something that you all would consider, we would like to be able to notify the staff who are interested, that we would pay them a regular rate for those hours.
Does that include them, we have to add on peasers and all that stuff too?
Yeah.
We have to do that for the summer staff that you hire in,
Yeah.
correct? So,
Oh, okay. Oh, all right.
how many individuals would this be?
I'd have to look at the exact numbers of how many vacancies we have left, but I would say roughly 6 or so, is my guess.
So that'd be
It's
a
not
change,
that
that'd be a
many.
change to the agreement, or not the agreement, the
To the
compensation.
comp plan,
The comp
yeah.
plan for them, because in there it does say.
Well, what it says in there is that staff specifically hired for summer would earn this much, and that's how we've treated it in the past. This would be a difference in practice. So
So the language says if you're hired for the summer, it just says.
It just says
It
summer
does not say
starting
if
rate.
you're
it just
a
says
current
summer
employee, you're at your regular rate.
Correct, yeah. So it would be a change in practice. But I mean, I could open the comp plan and make a revision if we needed to do that. I can review the language again, but I actually think the existing language would be okay. But just think about it and let me know if you have any questions or need to know how many staff we're talking about, that I can certainly let you know that.
I think you
Correct me if
give
I'm
some
wrong.
other staff a
Yeah.
ballpark figure.
Yeah,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but since it's, assuming you're talking about the Power Up camps and not ESY, couldn't we then use ESSER funds since it's the Power Up camps, which is for learning loss?
No, it's ESY. ESY is the one.
Oh, it's ESY that you're having trouble getting?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not the camps.
We got the camps. It's
Oh.
ESY.
Darn, okay.
That's good thought.
All right,
yeah, I'd be very with that.
yeah.
Okay, all right, anything else?
No, I think.
Debt revenue?
Just that we're going to officially move the meeting to the
To the
9th
Yes,
at 6 o'clock here,
yes.
which then I'll kick it over to Peg and Andrea that on the 9th, we've now moved this meeting from May 9th. So if you guys wanted to have your meeting still on the 16th for the policy meeting and move it up to 6 o'clock, that's an option. If you wanted to follow this meeting on the 9th, that's a different option.
Let's have one on the night.
Can we move it up to
Wow.
5 tonight? Can we move it up to 5? 4:30? Who, do I hear 4?
Anyway.
Policy meeting?
That's something for you to let us know.
That's on the-
I'll go with
Don't
5
give me
o'clock
a
for
hit.
after dinner.
That's fine. Can you do 5?
On one of the, I can't do.
Oh,
Yeah,
carpets.
I got you.
Well, we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah, no rush.
All right.
Whatever you guys figure out.
We pulled that.
So do we have anything else?
No, we
Motion
don't.
to adjourn?
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan.